And as always, we're going to be looking for accurate context, good risk management, and always exercising good patience.
Everybody who's traded has gone through periods of time where their strategy hasn't worked.
Where if not a hard stop, you should reevaluate the trades you're in based on time.
That's what we're here for, is to put ourselves in the best success. A trading routine does that, builds that habit, lets you know what to work on, what to reflect on, and what to improve on the next day.
All right. I believe that we are live now. If not, Holden will yell something in my ear. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining this very special group coaching session with Jared Tendler. And Holden, I am hearing something in the background. One moment. Group coaching session with Jared Tendler. And Holden, I am hearing something in the background. One moment. We will get this sorted out very quickly. All right. Hoag, do you have the stream on?
No, I do not.
Okay, well, I'll try and follow through it right now. Okay, so today we have one of the foremost experts, which is not what I am apparently in streaming, but one of the foremost experts in the trading psychology arena. Jared Tendler is with us today. He's the author of 2 books about the mental game of poker and 1 about the mental game of trading. Jared, so glad that you joined us today. And before we get started, I was thinking maybe you could tell everyone out there a little bit about your background and what got you into the coaching that you do.
Yeah. Well, good to be here. Always happy to help with the mental game of streaming. So I got into this 25 years ago, roughly, when I failed trying to qualify for the U.S. Open golf tournament. I want to play professional golf, and that was what my dream was. So, being in this spot now I wouldn't say what I was dreaming of back then. And kind of the classic kind of entrepreneurial, what was out there at the time didn't work for me. So I got to kind of build a better mousetrap, is what kind of pushed me to this field. Traditional sports psych, golf psych at that time, to me, just didn't work when it mattered most. It helped me become a better golfer in general. I was a 3-time All-American in Division III Skidmore, won 9 tournaments, but like playing in the U.S. Open qualifiers, USAM qualifiers, kind of the big events that I dream about, I just kind of kept choking. So it just wasn't kind of holding up under those key moments. And so I went and got a master's degree and subsequently spent 2 years, doing basically kind of home-based therapy with, kids and families in the Boston social service system, to get the experience to solve deeper issues. And then as soon as I got my license, quit my job, flew to Arizona and started building this program where I was combining therapy and sports psychology and golf psychology, and started working with golfers, juniors, some good amateurs, and of course some professionals on the PGA and LPGA tour. Built up a decent roster, and then met a poker player on the golf course, and there was nobody doing this in poker. So I had kind of wide open runway to kind of enter the field, and he used to play golf, and so it was kind of a nice entry into it. And then, after I wrote the mental game of poker, traders started picking it up, saying, "Hey, you just changed the word poker to trading. You've got yourself another book." I did some fair amount of half-assing in my life prior to that, but I knew I was not going to just quite literally do that. And after working with traders for a number of years, institutional ones as well, I can't say because of NDAs, but and then working with retail traders, that are very much like they're in this group coaching environment right now, from around the world for the last 8-9 years, and then wrote the mental game of trading kind of on the heels of that. I will say that I also, in that time, was the head of sports psychology for Team Liquid, which is one of the largest esport organizations in the world. And the main reason I say that is because the system that I developed, started in golf, translated to poker, translated to trading and esports, has kind of been proven at the highest levels of all of those industries, as well as some others. I had a world champion pool player that I've worked with as well, some MMA fighters, things like that. But the bottom line is trading has its own unique nature to it. And of course, there's some specific applications, but at the end of the day, we're all people first. And so if you can understand, what it takes to be, successful and to be at your best in the moments where it matters most, how to transition from a practice environment, a simulated environment to, the live market to, actually key moments within timing of the market, right? Where, you've got big opportunities. It's in those key moments where, your psychology, I think, matters most, right? The emotions that might start to hijack you and prevent you from executing the things that you should be doing. It happens in all performance environments, right? And so the system, like I said, has been systematized quite a lot over the last few years. And I think what's unique, within the trading sphere is that, it's rare that I come across a trader that doesn't have a strategy or a system. If they don't and they're profitable, my God, they're good for them. But you all have systems for how you trade and the way that you make decisions, and so it just makes sense that you'd have a system for trading psychology, and that's basically what I built.
Well, what I can say, even without an NDA, is that from my professional trading experience, there's a huge overlap between professional poker players, professional gamers, and being in the industry. The trading firm I was at, probably half the people had some high-level poker experience. So a lot of the same things going on with the market. Before we go further, we're also joined today by John Hoagland, who's our performance guru over here at Topstep. John, if you'd introduce yourself quickly for the people who may not know who you are.
Sure. My name is John Hoagland. I'm the middle-aged performance coach here at Topstep. Got 30 years as an active trader, and since about 2011, I've been with Topstep and had the opportunity to talk to and hopefully improve the performance of thousands of traders from all over the world. Pleasure to be here, and it's a great pleasure to meet you, Jared.
Yeah, you as well, John.
Great. Well, just to give a little, lay the ground rules of how we'll be doing this today, I have two of my buddies from Topstep in the comments there, JD and Dolby. Thank you so much. They'll be gathering up any questions you have. Plus, we had some questions that were submitted earlier. We'll try and get through some of them. And I'll just act as the moderator. I'm Jack, by the way. I had about 7 years experience trading US Treasuries at a pretty big prop firm. And I've been Topstep doing content stuff for about 3 years now. And I'm just going to try and let you guys do your thing. So to get started today, I saw some questions that were submitted ahead about fear, and I'll read what this person said. We had people talking about basically the fear and greed. They know that these things are something that is negative and to be avoided, but with so many things going on in their head, they don't know exactly how to do that, or why, no matter what they do, they still feel kind of haunted by the fear when they're in the live market or a trade. And Jared, starting with you, I was wondering if you had any insights into what you talk to clients about with fear, or how you can use that, or how it prevents you from getting better.
Yeah, and I'll say this is true not just of fear, but of any emotion, right? If your emotions are too high, too intense, then the part of the brain where you think, where you make decisions, where you plan, where you actually control your emotions, it becomes compromised. So this is not something that we all have control of. This is a biological facet. And as long as you are a functioning human being, right, that is the architecture of our brain. And so you can't change that reality. You can only kind of work within those rules. And so if you are going to kind of manage fear in a live market, then you've got to make sure that you're well prepared ahead of time and are in a good state of mind at the start. I think a lot of traders, their preparation can be poor. They can be spastic and just kind of ready. They want charts open. They want intensity. It's like everything they're kind of doing is actually amplifying that level of intensity. And so they start kind of at a baseline that is already maybe even too high. And then, of course, the live market only amplifies it further. And so you don't really have a chance to translate thought into action, and that's why you end up making a lot of it will feel like very basic mistakes, because the emotional part of the brain has kind of hijacked the frontal lobe, which is where you think and make decisions and plan. Now, what I would say is that by and large, fear in trading, I think, is overblown as a topic. There's a big difference between performance anxiety and fear. Now, I'll differentiate, because what I experienced as a golfer was performance anxiety. And the difference to me is Now, this wasn't the only issue I was dealing with, but I didn't understand that when I'm in an environment like that, my body is going to feel different, but it's immaterial, right? That the intensity that I'm feeling, whether it's the adrenaline or just the sensation in my body, if I focus my attention on it, it becomes a distraction. And that's exactly what happened to me. I was just like, I didn't know what to do with sort of these internal sensations. It was, but again, as distracting as if I forced you to focus on how your feet feel on the ground, right? If I force you to say, all right, pay attention to how your feet feel and continue to listen to my voice. And as you try to do that, right, you're going to notice this sort of switching of your attention between your feet and what I'm saying. And it's not pure. So pressure creates that same kind of a distraction, right? You get focused more internally. Now, within trading, I'm not saying that is necessarily what's happening in most of these cases, but I am saying that a lot of traders are not experienced enough in a high pressure competitive environment, that they are kind of not conditioned for the inherent pressure that they face, right? Trading is unlike golf, unlike the NFL, unlike most professional sports, unlike most performance arenas. Poker is probably the closest to it, but you can basically take 10K and go compete in the NFL, go compete on the PGA Tour, right? Effectively, you're entering this worldwide marketplace. And yet you really haven't had to go through the like natural selection that players have to go through as an athlete to, gain experience in lower levels and fail and try again. And it just, all of that conditions you to being able to perform better in those environments. And truthfully, as a golfer, I got better really late. I was a good tennis player, a good baseball player. And so I was in a performance environment, but just not as a golfer. So yeah, my skills were weak, and then the performance anxiety kind of preyed on that. So I'll kind of wrap up here with fear is differentiated by once you understand and can accept and embrace the inherent pressure that's involved. The fear comes in where there are these biases that you bring in, right? You want to know the future. You want to win today. You want to achieve your goals. You want to get through, the next phase to get funded. And that drive and desire is so intense that it causes you to fear making mistakes, fear failing, fear losing. And all of a sudden now you're imprinting these biases and these flaws into the market, right? And then that's causing you to underperform. And it's causing a lot of the chaos in your mind. Those two things are different. I think a lot of traders mistake the inherent performance anxiety with fear, and we need to separate those two. And if you can separate them and figure out what is fear and what is not, it really kind of defines what your next steps are going to be. Because I think for a lot of traders, right, they do have to get more conditioned with just the inherent intensity and just become, more accepting of that reality.
That's one of the big things that we discuss with the difference between trading sim versus trading live is I hadn't heard it put that way, where you're just not used to, unless you're really have skin on the game, so to speak, you're not used to that sort of pressure. Hoag, I was going to ask for you, do you think, does everyone to some extent feel these things? The best traders that you knew or anything like that, is anybody really just ice cold in their veins, or are they just managing their performance better?
No, I think that everybody starts with the same, whether it's performance anxiety or fear. We all start from pretty much the same place. There were traders that I knew in the pit that could take down 50, 100 contracts, no problem, but they didn't start that way. They started with one. So it's a kind of you got to learn to crawl before you can walk, before you can run, before you can fly type of situation. There's a lot of ability to get over fear, and there's a lot of time and ability to create fears that are probably irrational as far as trading is concerned. Now, I remember the first time I took down a 5 lot in the pit, I was scared to death. I was shaking. I couldn't even write down the trade. But I was fine trading 1 lots. So it's kind of like that, the 2x4 on the floor, 2x4, 2 feet off the floor, and 2x4, 4 feet off the floor. The greater the risk, the more difficult it is to go from one end to the other, but it's the same process.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, so I think for me, what I look at is like kind of as you climb the ranks and you become, like, there either is like, you're just going to get used to it, right? It's new. It's me playing on the PGA Tour for the first time, me playing in those tournaments for the first time, right? You just kind of get used to it over time. And it's not that the fear ever goes away. It's just that you understand what's going to happen. So you're better prepared for it and you can deal with it better.
Do you feel like you can
differentiate.
heal yourself to that fear? I mean, it's still there, but it's just not as, doesn't have the same power on you.
Yeah, exactly. Because you also kind of know kind of what to expect from yourself. Working with a golfer, right? This is a guy who I can say his name, but I won't. It doesn't really matter. But bottom line is, like, he's competed at the Players Championship the last couple of years and has been like in contention to win. He was in the final group with Justin Thomas 2 years ago, and it just first time like in that environment, like, and he just was wrong about how to handle it. And then last year, same deal in that environment, made the correction from the year before, but still wasn't exactly what it needed to be. And so you don't really know how you're going to respond to those situations until you're there. And so what I would say is that you're either just going to kind of learn from the experience, or for some of the traders here, what ends up happening is you get kind of hung up, right? There becomes like this sticky point where, yeah, like, it's irrational to fear losing because it's going to happen all the time. And yet you can't help yourself from that. And that is where we look at fear as being more of a signal of underlying biases, flaws, illusions, wishes, things that are kind of off in the way that you're viewing the situation, viewing yourself, viewing your strategy. And that's really what you have to figure out, right? The fear is a symptom of that. It's not the actual problem. If you go to battle the fear, you're fighting the wrong battle. I mean, if you're walking down the street and you feel pain in your foot, what are you going to do, right? You're not going to just keep walking with it. You're not going to like pretend it's not there. You're going to deal with it. And you're going to ask yourself, why am I experiencing pain? Now, the first thing you might do is look in your shoe. And if it turns out there's a rock there and that's what was causing the pain, cool. But the point is, you don't blame the pain. The pain's not the problem, right? The pain is just a signal telling you, look here. And so the fear, right, is that, right? If it's not performance anxiety and just the inherent pressure, then there's a flaw that you have to find, because when you correct that flaw, then you kind of get unstuck and can continue to progress kind of up the ladder.
Are there ways to go about practicing being under this performance pressure? Because I know you've used the example of golf, and I hear about golfers that will, at the end of their practice, won't stop until they've hit 50 3-foot putts in a row. And in a way, they're simulating that pressure, because if you make 48 putts in a row, even though it's not really for anything, you don't want to putt 48 more balls, again. With trading, I know we talk about practicing on a simulator, which is really important as far as building strategies and viabilities, but it almost seems tough I don't want to go out and tell people that to get better, you're going to need to trade in such a way that's going to make you sweat. Is there some better way to do that, or any ideas?
I think the simple answer is that you have to do what a lot of athletes do and make practice matter way more than it does now, right? It just, when you're in the sim and everything is easy and there's no stress and pressure, you literally are gaining nothing other than the testing that you're describing. You're not conditioning yourself. You're not exposing any weaknesses in your thought process, in the way that you're handling certain setups. The best athletes that I work with, and frankly, the best poker players and traders too, they take the time off of competition, off of trading, off of the poker table. They take that time as being of the utmost importance, and they put pressure on themselves, not just because they are trying to condition themselves, but because they understand that everything that they do is ultimately what they're going to take into competition, into the trading day. You can't create magic out of nothing, right? Your ability as a trader, right? We can't take anybody that's in this room that has 1 year of experience and say, you know what, tomorrow you're going to think like John, right? You're going to be a trader at that level. It can't happen. You can't magically just create that much competency, right? So the idea is that the more you practice, the more you train, the more you work outside of that, you're going to have more you can bring in. And so there should be more pressure, because ultimately what you bring is what you prepare for. So, right, the golfers are, right, they want to feel relaxed when they go to a tournament, and they feel that way because everything they brought is like with them. They can't magically create a better putting stroke. They might be able to refine it and tweak a few things, of course. So we're not saying what you got is what you got, but we are saying that it's not going to be a significant upgrade. So put a ton of pressure on yourself in the sim. Make it feel like this freaking matters, because at the end of the day, guess what? It does. If you fail here, right, then it's, I shouldn't say maybe fail. If you don't treat it with the utmost seriousness, then you're just getting bad practice. So I know that it's hard and it will never equal the live market. But if we get 50% of the way there, then what you've done is you've created enough stress and intensity that you're going to get some conditioning, and you're going to get some, kind of exposing to some of the inner flaws or the processes you're going to have to go through to manage your emotions. It might be scaled down and certainly a lot easier, but guess what? You're going through the mechanics of it. You're practicing it. And that ultimately is going to translate. Now, will it translate immediately? No, because you're still going to need to go through a transfer process, but it certainly will go a lot faster. So I think you really have to just amplify the seriousness with which you take the sim, because I think in general, it's just viewed as this thing where you can kind of do whatever the hell you want. There's no consequence.
It's deliberate practice.
Deliberate practice, exactly.
This kind of ties into another question we got that I'm sort of paraphrasing right now, which is a number of people ask questions along the lines of they know what they should do, right? They understand what they should be doing, but they feel that they can't consistently digest that in real time, or they get clouded by whatever else that they're feeling in the moment. And I think that that's ties into a lot about what we're talking about practice. John, you've been around this a long time. Are there any tips as far as that goes, or is it just you kind of have to keep on doing it until it becomes second nature?
Well, I've been at this a long time, and there are certain things that are second nature, and most of those are self-preservation. I lost my train of thought here. I'm sorry.
It's consistency. Basically, it seems that I think people, especially a lot of times at the experience level that would say be in a trading combine, have done a lot of maybe research and learning about trading more than the actual trading. And they may know a lot. The problem with trading is that it's kind of a time limit, right? Is that you have to know all these things at once, but really the important thing is, well, can you deploy them quickly when you need to? And I think that some people kind of seize up a little bit when that comes and kind of I know that would happen to me. There would be times where I would just feel just overwhelmed in a situation and just kind of shut down, sort of the equivalent of like choking in a sport or something like that.
You can freeze.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure there. And I was wondering if this can go to Hoag or Jared, if sort of like the idea of choking, is there anything that can be done to kind of limit?
I think I've known a lot of people that were great technicians. They could pick levels like champs, but they couldn't trade their way out of a paper bag. They never took the time to kind of build the thick skin or the steel to be able to handle the risk or the losses. And some of them made livings with, just picking levels for other people, but they couldn't trade. Jared, I don't know where we go with this, but
yeah. I mean, I think, so there's the sort of natural selection, right? Guys that, were able to kind of figure it out on their own. I think what I've tried to do is build a framework that can help others. And so what I would suggest is that if you are failing to transfer all of your knowledge, right, that's a factual reality, right? The bandwidth that you have when you're actually trading is far less than you do when you're relaxed. That's just a fact of, kind of the wiring in our minds, right? So what you would do is you would sort of scale down the amount of things that you're trying to bring in, right? Maybe it's the number of indicators, maybe it's the number of symbols, maybe it is even, your particular sizing or the number of types of setups that you're looking at. And what you're doing is trying to build some kind of positive experience, right? Positive, deliberate practice within like a live market, right? You're sort of treating it as practice in a sense. And so we don't want to put you in a position where you are kind of like destined to fail. And so, in my system, I call this an A to C game analysis, where you divide kind of your A game, B game, and C game. Now, this might be slightly different for, a newer trader. They don't even know what their levels are, right? They don't know what those are yet. But if you're a bit more experienced and you are trying to squeeze, an elephant through a door and trying to do too much at once, the idea would be the proof is in the pudding, right? What are you able to think about, at certain times? Maybe there are times where you are, kind of in your A game. And then there are other times where you're overwhelmed and your brain shuts down and you kind of choke. So what we would look at is, what are you still able to do at that time when you're in your C game, right? Because that provides you with a base. Now, it might be pathetic relative to what you're expecting and what you want your ability to be, your skill set, your decision-making process to be. But it's real. That's what you got. So you can either deny it or you can work with it. And if you're going to work with it, then you basically say, all right, what are the one or two things that I can do to suck less in those moments when it happens? And that's, I think kind of a fun way of looking at it, right? It's your job is not to be perfect, right? If you expect yourself to be perfect, you are going to fail because you can't be. You don't have the bandwidth to at that moment. But over time, if you can suck less continually in those moments, you create some little bit of progression. And the same is true in building discipline, building any kind of a habit, right? If I send you into the gym, and I'm not going to make, big judgments on you guys, but let's just say you can easily bench press 125, right?
Yeah, let's say that.
Let's just say that. So if I said, tomorrow you're going to bench press 300, like no one signs up for that unless you're, one of the guys from Jackass. So you're going to put on 120, 130, 135, and you're going to do maybe only 2 reps to push yourself hard. Like that's how you build muscle. So you scale down to what you can do and you figure out a kind of a game plan to build, at times when you suck less. And the thing is, you don't always know when you're going to be in that position, right? You don't know how you're going to feel at certain times in the market. You don't know that you're going to, get stopped out by a tick and see everybody else making money except for you. You don't know when the losses are going to kind of pile up, but you have to be ready to sort of switch from, oh yeah, I was out there trying to be at my best today. Now I got to go to kind of defense. It's like offense, defense, right? Very quickly in a football game, right? Interception, all of a sudden defense is back in the field. So you got to be ready to go with a kind of an adjustment so that you can suck less in those moments. And if you do that continually, right, that to me is how you build your way out of choking, because the choking is very often just a function of what you're expecting and what your true capacity is. And if we can shrink that, you're not going to choke.
You're talking about the inchworm.
I'm talking about inchworm. That's right, John.
Move the back end a little bit. The front end can move a little bit further.
That's right. Yeah.
I like that. I even have in my notes here. Our job is to suck less.
That's a good way to go through life. Just suck less every day. And you'd have to start as a pretty terrible person not to
right.
The best golfer of all time is also the one that was able to suck less the most, right? Tiger Woods, he was great because his C game, I'm guessing here, but I don't think anybody who knows the game would question this. He was easily 2 shots better than everybody else, even in the top 50 in the world, when everybody else was in their C game. C game to C game, 2 shots better, easily. But A game to A game, he might not even be the best. If he is, we're talking like 1/10 of a shot, 5% of a shot around. It was not much. He was great because he kept himself in the game so much more. He made cuts on the number and then would win the tournament, right? He was making cuts that most guys would be like, they were done. And he just was around because he never beat himself. So that is the name of and I think it applies perfectly to trade. Everybody, the old adage of like, it's not about, how big your winners are. It's how small your losses are. And so that's just another way of thinking about the importance of C game in that back end.
In the arena of sucking less, we also got a number of questions that deal with self-sabotage. I know before we went on a little bit today, we talked about this a little bit. One end of it was people who discussed anticipating anxiety. So if they were starting a new level in the combine or just getting a funded account, they felt like they were self-sabotaging because they were felt such anxiety going into it at the beginning. And maybe I'll toss this to Hoag first. Sort of, what do you feel like that when you're going to something new? It's kind of like what you talked about earlier when you sized up.
Yeah.
Is I think you just gotta, like Jared mentioned, play some defense and take it a little slower.
Well, at the very least, dance with the one you brung. I mean, there was a strategy that brought you to this. If you maintain that same strategy, if you take the trading combine seriously, like Jared said, if it's not real money, then if you don't treat it that way, when you get to real money, it's gonna feel different. Your decision making is going to be much more difficult. So, it's something we talk about with traders all the time is, you're going into a funded account. Don't act like it. Act like you're still just trading in your trading combine account. Dance with the one you brung. And then there's always the traders that think, okay, now I'm funded. Now I'm going to make a lot of money. I'm just going to go for it and make all kinds of money. And that just takes you out of your strategy. It takes you out of what brought you there. And that is, that's what's going to, create your eventual demise. I mean, if you don't have a strategy that you can depend on, then you're going to step away from that and you're going to get out of your process, and your decision making is all going to be different. And I think a lot of folks end up like Jared said, they're all twisted in a mess in their mind, and they can't operate that way.
That's a good point, John. I think, there's a lot of times they get in there and they feel like they have to do something special, right?
Don't impress us.
Yeah, exactly.
Survive.
Keep doing what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I would say though, about the idea of self-sabotage is that it's actually like an awful, awful term. It's not accurate at all. Okay? Self-sabotage, to truly self-sabotage yourself, you have to be so incredibly skilled. Okay. It is arrogant. It is overconfident to even use that term. You are not good enough to know how to cause your own demise. What's happening in that moment is your C game is the one in control. And the C game has popped up for a variety of reasons, of which you have to figure out. But it is not like a conscious choice. You're not making a decision to undermine yourself. Your C game weaknesses that you don't fully understand, they are tripping you up. Right? We go back to the inchworm. It's effectively like you kind of get ahead of yourself, and you are going to get tripped up because you don't understand effectively like the rocks in your shoes, the things that are undermining your ability. It is not a choice. You are not self-sabotaging. You are just falling to the base of your weaknesses. What is that quote? Like, we don't rise to our aspirations. We fall to the level of our training. Right? That's what's happening. You're falling because your training is either poor on a technical side or it's poor on a mental side. So if anybody does one thing, and I'm maybe being a bit dramatic here, but I would prefer if anybody in this listening never uses the word self-sabotage again, because none of you are actually good enough to be able to call it.
I never thought of that. I mean, you'd really have to know how the markets are to be able to do the opposite of what would benefit you.
Exactly.
You don't know. I never even thought of that. That's amazing.
There's a comedian from the 70s in the UK, and I only know this because the guy that I wrote the poker book with was from the UK. He was a brilliant comedian, and he knew the exact wrong note to play for maximum comedic effect as he was, in his performance. That is self-sabotage. He was purposefully undermining himself for comedic effect. Otherwise, if it ain't that, then you're just not as good as you think you are.
Yeah, that's wild about self-sabotage there. So much so. Sorry, I was reading the next question over there. Well, what I was going to say is that I think that overall, I can attest to the data we have from our traders is that I think that everybody's A game is quite good. I think it is the C game where people struggle. And before we were on here, Jared, you were talking about the case of the F-it, so to speak, which is something I see quite a bit. And I think something easy that you cannot do. I mean, Jared, you can explain this better than I, so I'll let you go ahead with it.
Yeah, it's just the idea. Like, I mean, depending on where you are and kind of your aspirations here, you might get to a point where you're in the combine, or maybe you're in a funded account, but under, kind of straight, tight lock and key. And you've got some losses. Maybe you violated your rules and had some outsized losses, and now you got 20% left in the account. And you're far from, reaching the goal that's going to get you to kind of graduate to the next level. And you're like, F it. Let's just throw it in way oversized than you would normally. And that feels okay, right? It feels like an appropriate gamble, and you kind of rationalize it that way. But that is so bad for the long term. And the reason is because what you're doing is you are giving yourself an out. You're letting yourself off the hook. You're not forcing yourself into a corner where you've got to dig your way out the right way. So what's going to happen the next time you get into that situation, when you have a funded account and maybe farther up the ranks, you're going to do the same freaking thing because it's allowed. There's one thing whenever I worked with junior golfers, I never allowed them to take a mulligan. And there were times where I would force them, maybe not in a tournament round, because I wouldn't want to purposefully put them in a too tough a spot, but I would force them to show up to the golf course like 10 minutes before they were going to tee off. They couldn't warm up. They couldn't practice. They just had to show up and go. And so what that does is, right, if you never kind of get a chance to like have a do-over, if you never have the chance to like prepare yourself well, you force yourself into a position where you have to figure it out, dig your way out. And if you've got 20% left in the account and you got a long way to go, it sucks. But I promise you, you are going to learn things in that process that's actually going to carry you forward, because it's not the money that is going to make you successful long-term. You have to have the skill, and some of these soft skills, John knows, he sees guys that have had to like find their way through. It's like, that's what matters in the long term, right? You're just after quick money, and that money is going to go away.
I've had this conversation with so many people, like, I'm so close to the loss limit, I'm just going to reset. No, size down, work your way out of this. You're going to learn so much about yourself by working your way out of this. And it almost seems like that effort mentality is, I think, what we call self-sabotage. Like, if it works, great, but that's just reinforcing bad behavior.
Yes.
Well, it's cheating. It's shielding yourself.
Sorry, that last point is actually the most important thing. It reinforces bad behavior. And the crazy thing is, it actually makes your confidence weaker, because if the gambling and the bad behavior gets rewarded, well, then, like, what does that mean for the system that I've developed? Does that mean it's no longer that good? Or like, what the heck am I? Like, what am I, that trader that's just a gambler? Or am I like, I'm not saying this is always a battle mentally, but it will be a battle at some point, because you're going to have to make a choice. You can't do both. And so your confidence becomes a lot weaker as a result of the efforts, basically.
And your ability to work your way out of these things without creating bad behaviors and is it's through process. If you can dig your way out of this, you're going to be a better trader for it.
And doing the effort, it's just shielding yourself from responsibility. People do this in all sorts of things, and it drives me crazy, not just trading. But it's essentially that if you say, F it, I don't care, it's sort of like, well, I could have, but F it, it's not worth it. It's just kind of taking away from any responsibility you have for that. So that drives me nuts. I'd love to do a couple quick fire questions, because there's a couple good ones from the topic that might not be too long here. One question: our brain is like, I'm interested to see if anyone actually has an opinion on this. Our brain is like a computer. Is listening to music while trading bad because computing time is being used?
I would say bad is a relative term. Is it bad for some people at sometimes? Yes. Is it good for some people at sometimes? Yes. I mean, we don't make hard and fast rules with that stuff. To me, that's fine tuning and personalized, and there's timing to it. To me, the rules that I have are, kind of very basic, like the things that are biologically true for everybody. Then we make hard and fast rules. The rest of it is window dressing.
Well, if we can find like two groups of randomly assorted traders and have one listen to music, we'll get to the bottom of this. But
there you go.
I guess the jury's out. Next question from here. What would you say is the number one exercise or mindset shift that has shifted your client's profitability to one of success to failure, like an eye opener? I think this is probably for Jared there. So what is like
Yeah.
the one or one of the better exercises or something like that?
Realizing that there's not one thing that's going to fix everything, right? The flaw inherent in that question says it all, right? So many people want a quick fix, and that question is kind of like looking for that. And so when you realize that there aren't quick fixes for developing real skill, you can't read my book and think that that's going to solve your problems. Just like you can't read a book on personal training and have that give you muscles. So you have to do the work, and there's just no shortcuts to it. Some people are going to have to work harder because they've got bigger problems. They got to do more like rehab before they start to build muscle. Some people are ready to go. But the bottom line is you have to put in the work, whether it's from a strategic, technical standpoint, developing system strategy, or from a mental standpoint. So there are no quick fixes.
And no mulligans.
Yeah, no
right.
mulligans.
It all
in
counts.
trading. Yeah, can't bust those trades very rarely. Another question we have here is this is kind of a general one. We have some coaches playbook on it, but like, how do you know when a strategy is not working?
Give that to one to John.
I have my standard answer too, which is it's all about tracking data, right? If you'll only know if your strategy isn't working if you completely follow your strategy. And then you can tweak things little by little if they're not working based on a sample of many trading sessions. And if things aren't working, size down. If things are working, size up proportionally based on a long-term strategy like that. That would be how I would go about building a trading strategy. Anything to add, Hoag?
Well, if you're talking about a strategy that was recently profitable and is no longer profitable, it's not the strategy, it's the market state or your mental state.
Yeah. Got some questions about going on tilt. That's a little bit what we said with the efforts here. Hoag, have you ever been on tilt?
Oh, yes.
I have. It happens.
A few thousand.
I was on tilt last night, so it's not. No one's immune.
Yeah.
I'm famous for tilt, but I've learned how to recognize it and how not to react in that compromised state.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think half of it is, what is it that the good Dr. Menaker used to say about recognizing? We get a lot of questions about controlling emotions, but that's not something that should be the goal, because you are a human being and emotions are going to exist, but rather recognizing them and responding accordingly.
I mean, I guess the way I would pitch it is the control is the short-term strategy. It's like it's the cast on the broken ankle. The long-term strategy is let's understand the cause of the excessiveness, right? What my strategy, my system is really all about is like identifying these flaws and kind of cleaning your emotions out so that they become pure and more of a kind of based on your pure drive and motivation, right? And what you want, right? We need emotion to fuel our, kind of top end performance. So you don't want to be emotionless. What you want is that emotion to be kind of stable, not volatile, right? And so anger and the sources of anger, just like the sources of fear and overconfidence or greed, right? They create the volatility, they create the randomness, and that's what we want to kind of clean out. So you identify like the source of the tilt by writing down what is going through your mind at that time. And if it's nothing, then try to scale it back and understand what was going on in your mind early on, right? Last night I was tired. It was 10 o'clock and my daughter was still not asleep. So yeah, I got tilted because there was only so many times I could tell her to go to sleep. And so, what is my flaw there? Yeah. Okay. Lost a little bit of impatience, a little bit of, desire for control. Yeah. Sue me. Right. But that's what I'm working on. Okay. But the point is, like, you got to figure out what those underlying flaws are. And that is the source of the tilt. That's how you are able to become not emotionless, but just kind of cleaner.
It's in those emotions where you're going to get your answer on how to respond to them.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. And understand what's causing it.
Before we get to the last few bangers of questions here, I'd be remiss, I've been told by the social department, to continue this conversation on the Discord, the Topstep Discord. Join it if you want to talk to some other traders. I think we got an active community of about 800 people there. And find a trading buddy, help out through the day. I don't like to play
Everybody
favorites.
needs a friend.
Yeah, everyone needs a friend. Accountability partners. I don't like to play favorites, but this was among my favorite questions. And it's about imposter syndrome. Could you talk about imposter syndrome and how that affects trading? I do everything I can to be a good trader, putting in over 16 hours of work per week, trading, backtesting, journaling, learning new things. But part of me does not believe I deserve success. Why might that be?
Is this your favorite, Jack, because you have imposter syndrome too?
Yes, I wrote this.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm an imposter. Like I thought I could run a good stream, and look what happened at the beginning. I'll hide.
Yeah, I'll go elsewhere. Yeah, so imposter syndrome is basically low confidence, right? And so if we look at what confidence is an emotion. Okay. Confidence is not something that's solid. Confidence is the emotion that reflects your perception of your skill. Okay. Perception of your skill. There are traders who are incredibly skilled and they just don't appreciate what they have. They don't appreciate their skill set. They can go through a small drawdown and all of a sudden think they suck. How is that even possible? When there are traders who have been doing this for 6 months that in that moment are more confident than they are, which is obviously completely wrong, given that they're not nearly as skilled. So confidence is not something that is factual, right? Although that's the goal, right? We want confidence to be as accurate as possible. So when you have imposter syndrome, most of the time, I'm not going to say always, right? But most of the time, you are actually very dismissive of your real skill. And this might be something that is not just emerged as a trader, but something that has been kind of carried forward throughout, your life prior. There's a blog that I wrote. You can go to my website. Basically, it's on perfectionism. And there's a lot of perfectionists, a lot of people with very high expectations that have imposter syndrome because those high expectations loom so large that they damage your ability to see yourself accurately. And over time, your confidence weakens because you're never able to kind of measure up. And even if you do, it was just like what you were expected to do. So it doesn't really mean that much. And so when you go back and really kind of value the accomplishments that you've achieved, the steps that it took to get there, the skills that you've learned that are, maybe transferable to trading, when you start to kind of reconcile all of that, the imposter syndrome starts to disappear because you're now kind of on solid ground. But when you don't feel like what you're holding is worthwhile, imposter syndrome is going to rank up. So yeah, it's just kind of firmly in this category of low confidence. And that's kind of where you need to dig and figure out.
Jared, would you say that, along with there's a lack of confidence, a lack of esteem for oneself. I mean, self-esteem seems to be a theme basically in my trading forever is if I don't feel good about myself, I don't trade well.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that could either be that you're like aware that you're kind of out of sync with the market and there's something kind of strategically that needs to get ironed out. And that could be very practical, right? So it's like your spidey sense is kind of ticked up, or it might be that you kind of found yourself in a spot where you haven't really kind of appreciated all the skills that you've developed and honed. Like there's a thing called expert induced amnesia, right? You become really, really good at something. You forget like the basics of how you even got there. I took a lesson out of the bunker with a guy who was awesome. I was like so excited to take a lesson from this guy. And he basically told me within 10 seconds, he's like, look, you're taking too much sand. Like, all right, cool. Like, what do I do? He's like, well, take less.
Yeah.
Like, how? He's like, well, all I do is I think take less sand and I take less sand. So my point is, right, it's so easy to take for granted some of the things that you've learned. And so, do a forensics, go back into those kind of real big points in your career and like understand how you did it, what you learned, what mistakes you made. I mean, all of that stuff is really valuable and there. And effectively, I think for you and for others, you basically become like the David Copperfield or the David Blaine. You're a magician. You're making yourself forget and have all of your past experience just disappear. And so if you can make it reappear, because it does exist, then the imposter syndrome and the confidence gets stabilized in a way that's real.
You generally deserve to be where you are. I mean, I think everybody suffers from imposter syndrome in any career or anything else. It's an emotion that comes up, but generally you deserve what you deserve. So hope that helps you out there. One kind of crazy question that I'm just going to address before we kind of go to our I'll say the final question will be along the lines of just advice for people that are getting started in trading. But someone was talking about how they blew way through their profit target in the trading combine with the consistency rule, and they were basically said that they were then trying to lose money but could not lose money. And I've never had to give the tip before, but if you want to lose money in futures, you can just go to a slow moving market in the simulator and you just hit the bid, lift the offer, hit the bid, lift the offer, and you will lose as much money as you need to lose. That is just some advice for a very small segment of the population that needs to do that. So with that out of the way, as we're winding down here, I think from both of you guys, I would love to just kind of hear any advice for people who are, I know we've talked about a lot of this, but say the kind of people that are in the trading combine or just getting started, of just some resources or things that you've seen help people kind of improve, basically.
I guess I'll jump in here first. If you're newer, right, you're not going to have specific trading performance issues yet, right? From a mental standpoint, you're too new for that to be the case. That doesn't mean that you're free of mental and emotional volatility. It doesn't mean but it's generally going to mean that all that stuff is going to come from either other performance environments, right? Bad habits you develop there, or just flaws that are there, or your personal life. So you have an opportunity to maybe like learn some things about yourself that you might not otherwise see from other environments, or maybe you do see it and now you got to actually work on it, because if you want to get better at trading faster, you're going to have to kind of work through this. You may have kind of gotten away with it earlier on as you got better at whatever you were doing. But yeah, first 6 months as a trader, that's kind of how I would think about it. Once you've kind of graduated beyond that, you're going to start to develop more of the performance-based flaws that are kind of more of the purview of what, is in my book.
Would you suggest that somebody familiarize themselves with the Dunning-Kruger effect before they get involved?
Heck yeah.
That's a huge thing. I've talked before that when I left college to go, I wanted to go into the trading industry. I was a math guy. And I remember like thinking at the time, I knew nothing about trading, being like, oh, well, if you're a trader until age 30, at a big place, you make like an average of like 700 grand a year or something. I mean, that's good money. And I just got to do it in 8 years. That's an example of the Dunning-Kruger effect, in that I have no idea at all what that entails or how you even make money trading, but thought that was what just kind of happened. Like I was punching the clock. It turns out that is not what happens. But then after a few years, when you're not seeing that, but you have more experience in the markets, it takes a certain amount of experience to even know that you suck at something. So just knowing that you suck, you've already taken a couple steps. That's great.
And just work on sucking less.
Yeah, there we go. If that should be the title of all of this, is just sucking less. If you look in the before we do some plugs and go-aways, I know that send-offs in the comments, I know that JD and Nick have been giving links to various resources, so check those out if you want. Hoag, if you want to give a quick plug for where you are, which is hint on YouTube as well, the forecast. And
oh yeah, I'm just happy that you guys were here today, because usually I'm alone for group coaching and they hear enough from me. But I'll see everybody for the forecast, the recap, make Hoag money, and next Monday's group coaching. Always a pleasure.
It was a pleasure. And then Jared, you have so much out there to plug. What are you doing these days?
I'll take it slow. Yeah, obviously the book, Mental Game of Trading, wherever you want to buy wherever you buy books, it's there. On my website, a little bit of discount. Thanks, John. I appreciate that.
I've read it too. It's great.
Thank you, John. Thanks, Jack. So it's on my website, jaredtendler.com. I've got a little bit of a sale. And if you want a signed copy, either for yourself or for a friend, you just let me know in the comments. But on my website, I also have a ton of free resources. So there's like worksheets that kind of go along with the book. There's, my blog, which I write monthly. I also host a monthly office hours. So make sure you kind of get signed up to my newsletter, and All that stuff is there. And I also have a masterclass out that there's information on that, where basically for people, I think there's two camps. There's ones that have kind of read the book and they're like, I want more. I want to kind of walk through the system with lots of more examples and, kind of more detail and case studies and things like that. And so that's part of that masterclass. But then there's also, I think, people who don't really learn great from a book. It's a lot of, kind of work to get through it all on your own. So the masterclass kind of summarizes a lot of it. But I would still recommend that you have the book, because while the masterclass does a great job, I think, of helping you to develop your own strategy and personalize it, there is more content that you can use, for the system that is not covered in there, for obvious reasons. I think the thing was like maybe 15 hours long. There's a ton of examples in there. So between all that, and you can also follow me on Twitter at Jared Tendler.
Yeah,
I think that's probably it.
And don't worry, it's not like $150 textbook or something. This is a readable book. It's great. You should definitely check it out. I guess we've already covered basically the idea is to suck less, but just as an outro, I think that there's a lot of interest in general in the industry and many industries everywhere right now with the idea of performance coaching, just because it is something that works. And I think that the proof that it works is that a lot of places that are very successful that use it wouldn't use it, because they wouldn't use it if that's the case. So, if you're not the traditional therapy type, but you would like to do some performance coaching, check it out. It's always good to have an accountability partner. So that's something we stress here. So, Hoag, Jared, thank you so much for joining today. I'm sure this won't be the last time we see each other along this journey, but it was fantastic. So thank you very much. And Hoag, do you want to sign us off with one of your heartfelt goodbyes?
Sure. Trading isn't easy. We know that. It's one thing to know the markets. It's a better thing to know yourself. So get out there, profit today, and just try and suck a little less.
That's
Amazing.
all.
Good stuff,
See you
Don.
later.
Good to see you guys.